and we've done a great job for all of them. And now we're getting out. Long time. We were supposed to be there for 30 days. That was almost 10 years ago. So we're there for 30 days, and now we're leaving. It was supposed to be a very quick hit, and let's get out, and it was a quick hit, except they stayed for almost 10 years. Let someone else fight over this long, blood-stained sand. I want to thank Vice President Pence and Secretary of State Pompeo for leading the American delegation so successfully to Turkey several days ago, along with National Security Advisor O'Brien. I want to thank them very much. The American delegation negotiated the original 5-day ceasefire that ended Kurdish fighters to safely leave. It just got them to a point where, frankly, they were able, it enabled them to get out, to go and move really just a few miles in a slightly different direction. So this enabled them to do so. Countless lives are now being saved as a result of our negotiation with Turkey, an outcome reached without spilling one drop of American blood. No injuries, nobody shot, nobody killed. I have just spoken to General Mazlum, a wonderful man, the commander-in-chief of the SDF Kurds, and he was extremely thankful for what the United States has done. Could not have been more thankful. General Mazlum has assured me that ISIS is under very, very strict lock and key, and the detention facilities are being strongly maintained. There were a few that got out, a small number, relatively speaking, and they've been largely recaptured. I'm also sure that he will be issuing his own statement very shortly. We had a great talk, but we've saved the lives of many, many Kurds. He understands that. The war was going to be vicious and probably not very long. And I'm very happy to have been involved in it, as are our Vice President, our Secretary of State, and all of the other people on our team. By getting that ceasefire to stick, we've done something that's very, very special. But by getting the ceasefire after a tremendous amount of really tough war for a very short period of days, that is something very special. Our troops are safe, and the pain and suffering of the 3-day fight that occurred was directly responsible for our ability to make an agreement with Turkey and the Kurds that could never have been made without this short-term outburst. Should Turkey fail to honor its obligations, including the protection of religious and ethnic minorities, which I truly believe they will do, we reserve the right to reimpose crippling sanctions, including substantially increased tariffs on steel and all other products coming out of Turkey. We are now an economic powerhouse like never before, and very importantly, like no other. Our economic might is stronger than it's ever been, and our competitors are not doing very well. We also expect Turkey to abide by its commitment regarding ISIS as a backup to the Kurds, watching over them. Should something happen, Turkey is there to grab them. Further, we implore European countries to come and take those fighters that the U.S. captured and bring them back to their countries for incarceration and for trial. Until just recently, Europe has been very unresponsive in doing what they should have been doing for a long time. Now is their chance to finally act. American forces defeated 100% of the ISIS caliphate during the last 2 years. We thank the Syrian Democratic Forces for their sacrifices in this effort. They've been terrific. Now Turkey, Syria, and others in the region must work to ensure that ISIS does not regain any territory. It's their neighborhood. They have to maintain it. They have to take care of it. There were some political pundits who responded to Turkey's offensive in Syria by calling for yet another American military intervention. I don't think so. But halting the incursion by military force would have required deploying tens of thousands of American troops against Turkey, a NATO ally, and a country the United States has developed a very good relationship with, including President Erdogan. The same people that I watched and read giving me and the United States advice were the people that I have been watching and reading for many years. They are the ones that got us into the Middle East mess, but never had the vision or the courage to get us out. They just talk. How many Americans must die in the Middle East in the midst of these ancient sectarian and tribal conflicts? After all of the precious blood and treasure America has poured into the deserts of the Middle East, I am committed to pursuing a different course, one that leads to victory for America. Through much work, we have done things that everybody said couldn't be done. Today's announcement validates our course of action with Turkey that only a couple of weeks ago was scorned. And now people are saying, wow, what a great outcome. Congratulations. It's too early to me to be congratulated, but we've done a good job. We've saved a lot of lives. Most importantly, we have avoided another costly military intervention that could have led to disastrous, far-reaching consequences. Many thousands of people could have been killed. The last administration said Assad must go. They could have easily produced that outcome, but they didn't. In fact, they drew a very powerful red line in the sand. You all remember the red line in the sand when children were gassed and killed, but then did not honor their commitment as other children died in the same horrible manner. But I did honor my commitments with 58 Tomahawks. 8 long years after President Obama's ill-fated push at regime change, U.S. troops are still on the ground in Syria. More than 500,000 people are dead, hundreds of thousands are terribly injured, and millions more Syrians are displaced. It really is a nightmare of misery. Across the Middle East, we have seen anguish on a colossal scale. We have spent $8 trillion on wars in the Middle East, never really wanting to win those wars. But after all that money was spent and all those lives lost, the young men and women gravely wounded so many, the Middle East is less safe, less stable, and less secure than before these conflicts began. The same people pushing for these wars are often the ones demanding America open its doors to unlimited migration from war-torn regions, importing the terrorism and the threat of terrorism right to our own shores. But not anymore. My administration understands that immigration security is national security. As a candidate for president, I made clear that we needed a new approach to American foreign policy, one guided not by ideology, but by experience, history, and a realistic understanding of the world. We are building up America's military might like never before, investing $2.5 trillion since my election. But we will not be depleted. We will not happen again. It will not be allowed to happen again. where our military is depleted, fighting in areas of the world where we shouldn't be. When we commit American troops to battle, we must do so only when a vital national interest is at stake. And when we have a clear objective, a plan for victory, and a path out of conflict, that's what we have to have. We need a plan of victory. We will only win. Our whole basis has to be the right plan, and then we will only win. Nobody can beat us. Nobody can beat us. I want to again thank everyone on the American team who helped achieve the ceasefire in Syria, saved so many lives, along with President Erdogan of Turkey, a man I've gotten to know very well, and a man who loves his country. And in his mind, he's doing the right thing for his country. And we may be meeting in the very near future. I also want to thank General Mazloum for his understanding and for his great strength and for his incredible words today to me, but me just as a representative of the United States, because he knows that we saved tens of thousands of Kurds. And we're not talking in the long term, we're talking in the short term. We're talking something that was going on immediately and something, frankly, that was planned for a long time. The job of our military is not to police the world. Other nations must step up and do their fair share. That hasn't taken place. Today's breakthrough is a critical step in that direction. Thank you all very much, and God bless America. Thank you.
Mr. President, you said that the ISIS fighters who escaped have been recaptured, but today your top envoy said that's not true, that they don't know where they are. Do you have a comment?
Boy, a lot to unpack there. President Trump in the diplomatic reception room in the White House touting what he called a major breakthrough in Syria in the Middle East. Apparently, he's talking about the ceasefire that was first negotiated by his Vice President Mike Pence and his Secretary of State Mike Pompeo about 5 days ago. Of course, it comes 2 weeks to the day that Turkey moved into northern Syria to drive the Kurds out, a move that was made possible 3 days after a phone call between President Trump and President Erdogan of Turkey, where the president made it clear that he would not stand in the way of President Erdogan of Turkey going in to move the Kurds out. The president also announcing that in the wake of, again, he called it a major breakthrough, he would lift all sanctions on Turkey, a major gift to President Erdogan. And this is all setting up a remarkable split-screen moment in Washington, because as the president was speaking, we want to show it right here, the president's envoy to Syria, Jim Jeffrey, was testifying on Capitol Hill. This is the president's ambassador, the special envoy for Syria, who was warning about widespread ethnic cleansing of the Kurds in that area since the Turks have gone in, called the situation a tragedy and a terribly bad and very dangerous decision on Turkey's part, also pointing out that over 100 ISIS fighters have escaped in recent days. The president said we got them all back, that only a few had gotten out. Ambassador Jeffrey did not make that claim. And Cecilia Vega, our senior White House correspondent, I'm here with you right now. To say the least, the president's reading of events now in Syria and Turkey, somewhat unique.
Completely unique, specifically in the sense that they completely contradict what is happening at this moment on Capitol Hill with this ambassador that you just mentioned. He also said that U.S. force withdrawal will hurt the fight against ISIS and that we have not been successful. He called this a tragedy and said that they've seen war crimes there, George. There's some irony happening in what we just saw. This was the president essentially taking credit and praising this ceasefire for a ceasefire that was needed to end fighting that most, even his allies on Capitol Hill, say began because he withdrew these troops there. What I think they're doing in this White House, if I were to play a little bit of a guessing game, this is the president attempting to take credit for promises kept on the campaign trail. He has been saying that he wants to bring these troops home. We do know that some of them will be staying behind. He said there today in these oil fields in that area. The president a few days ago had said that he didn't think that would be necessary. But the big headline in this, George, is the pushback, the blowback that he has faced over this from his own allies on Capitol Hill. Mitch McConnell said that this was a strategic nightmare nightmare for our country, and this near unanimous, almost, resolution passed in the House condemning the president's move didn't go far enough. So he's got a lot of problems on his hand here on the home front on this one at a time when he really needs those allies, given this impeachment inquiry that he's facing as well.
It has been a chaotic situation on the ground there in northeastern Syria as well. I want to go to James Longman, who is in the region right now. We heard the president, James, say that he talked to General Mazloum, the leader of the Kurds, said that, according to the president, that General Mazloum was grateful. We know, and we have known, that the Kurds had seen the move by the White House, by the president, as a betrayal and greeted U.S. forces with potatoes.
Yeah, that's right, George. Actually, in the last few moments, we've seen a tweet from General Mazloum. It seems to support what the president was saying. He's saying, I just spoke with President Trump and explained to him the Turkish violations of the truth that would not have been possible without his great efforts. But I'll point you to an important line. He says, President Trump promised to maintain partnership with the SDF and long-term support. In public, the SDF has to thank President Trump because they are exposed now. You know, I think we've been speaking to Kurdish commanders on the front line, and they've said that both the US-Turkey agreement that was struck and the agreement that followed between Russia and Turkey, and note the president didn't once mention Russia there, both essentially legitimized Turkey's incursion into northern Syria. The new agreement between Turkey and Russia allows Turkey to keep that 20-mile zone on the border, but it further asks the Kurds, or rather forces the Kurds, to move out from another part of territory to the east and west, all along the border. President Erdogan today was saying that Kurdish fortifications would be destroyed, that the Kurdish forces must move back. He calls them terrorists. And I think over and above what's happened over the last 10 days, Kurdish people are worried about what happens going forward. President Erdogan's bigger picture here, which is the resettlement of millions of Syrians into their homeland. As you were just saying, there is a very, very delicate ethnic and religious balance in this part of the world. This northeastern corner of Syria, throughout this Syrian civil war, has been relatively peaceful. It's been a place where Muslim and Christian have lived side by side in relative peace. It's where women often have been empowered in a way they're not empowered in other parts of the region. All that, I think, is now on the line, because what President Erdogan wants to do is essentially repopulate this part of northern Syria with Sunni Arabs, and the ethnic tensions that are possible as a result of that are pretty startling. George.
Okay, James, thanks. I want to bring in our senior nationals correspondent, Terry Moran, as well. Terry, Cecilia pointed out that the president received a lot of blowback from Republicans on Capitol Hill. In fact, Senator McConnell has been preparing a resolution criticizing the president's policy. But also, to pick up on what James Longman just said there, the president railed against President Obama and his attempts to take Assad out in Syria. One of the consequences of the last couple of weeks is we've seen the strengthening of the position of Assad, of Erdogan in Turkey, of Vladimir Putin.
Absolutely, George. Make no mistake about it. In the Middle East, this is seen as a strategic defeat for the United States, and one self-inflicted, as bad, if not worse, than President Obama's drawing of the red line when Syria used chemical weapons and then backing away, getting UN inspectors in there, hoping to do the job that way. Strength counts in that part of the world, and this is seen as an act of weakness in the face of Turkey, of President Erdogan, who wanted to invade that part of Syria, and the United States was stopping them, and somehow managed to get President Trump to back down and abandon our allies. More than 10,000 Syrian Kurds died fighting under the direction of the United States in putting down ISIS. Those gains are now put at risk, and as you point out, Russia and Assad in Syria and his backer Iran are now strengthened. However, the key line in this to me was President Trump saying, let someone else fight over this long blood-stained sand. That is the attitude of one of the reasons that he got elected, these endless wars. The question is, will voters see that he's doing it the right way, that keeps America's reputation in the world strong, that keeps the United States' interests safe and secure, or is he doing it in a chaotic way that empowers our adversaries and enemies in the region and beyond?
Excellent point and excellent question, Terry. We should also point out that as the president was pulling out of Syria, however, he was sending 1,800 troops into Saudi Arabia.
That's right. So it's not as if the United States is pulling back. We're shifting our interests. He is a strong backer of Saudi Arabia under the leadership of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who was, U.S. intelligence says, was responsible for the murder of the journalist in Turkey. So he still is on the board there. But with whom our traditional allies are at a loss to figure out what his policy is. And there's no question that in the face of this difficulty, there are people in the Middle East who will say the United States cannot be counted on when the going gets rough.
President Trump says he's committed to a different course. Terry, thanks very much to see you. Thank you, James Longman in Iraq as well. We're going to sign off for now. Our coverage will continue online. Of course, the full report tonight on World News Tonight with David Muir. Have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from ABC News.